I now yield 5 minutes to Congressman Jones from North Carolina.
Mr. Chairman, thank you again. And I again want to start with an email from my district and then get to a question. This is Mr. Gordon Hanson from New Bern, North Carolina. Thank you for requesting my opinion with regard to the Federal Reserve. My initial reaction to the Fed's policy to printing more money is, how is the Fed going to stop inflation? Since the beginning of this century, standard of living has decreased because fuel increased so rapidly the middle class wages could not keep up, and no one seems to notice or care. This is America talking, quite frankly. And we have been elected by the people from all over this country to represent their feelings and their needs in Washington, D.C. I have great respect for each and every one of you. You're very learned men, much more than I. The frustration that I see back in my district and I feel is that when I was born in 1943, and thank you for recognizing my birthday tomorrow. When I was born in 1943, this country was in war and coming out of war. This country impressed the world with its greatness after the war, of how we were in a position where we were creating things, we were manufacturing things. And that gets me to the point that I am one of the few Republicans. I am opposed to any trade agreement at this time. I'm not adamantly opposed to trade agreements, but when you're in a deep recession, which everybody has acknowledged, why are we passing the Korean trade agreement so we can create 70,000 jobs, I believe has been said. I'm trying to verify that, by the way. I don't believe it. But the point is, this country is a debtor nation. We can pump it up from the feds to everybody else can put money out here, but as everybody's saying, the people understand what's happening. They fully understand what's happening. So my point is this: my state of North Carolina from 1999 until 2009 lost 376,000 manufacturing jobs. What would have happened in your opinion? I got a two-part question. What would happen in your opinion if we had not passed NAFTA, CAFTA, and all these trade agreements that supposedly were going to create more jobs for the American people? I think greed is probably the most dangerous thing affecting America. Greed will destroy an individual, it will destroy a family, it will destroy a country. And my humble opinion is that greed has put America in this position, not only because of trade agreements, but in your learned minds, give me an example of nations that at one time were economically strong, and yet because of some decision such as free trade, that these nations, and maybe it's not exactly the same comparison, but these nations, in my opinion, at one time Spain ruled the world. At one time France ruled the world. At one time Rome ruled the world. At one time America was the dominant power. Now it's China. And we are slaves to China. We owe over $900 billion. I mean, from an economic standpoint, where do you see America? Are we at a point that America needs to understand that we cannot come back to be a strong power in the nation, in the world? Are we at a point that we're going to have, yes, we'll have somewhat of a quality of lifestyle, but it's never going to go back. It's not even going to come close to going back to what it was. I don't think you can continue to sell yourself out to other nations and expect to be strong economically or militarily. Any response?
Well, sir, the countries you mentioned, the Spanish Empire and so forth, they essentially bankrupted themselves with empire. And we, in my view, we're a long way down that road with our military empire all around the world, too. And so I think that's a contributing factor. And the only other thing I'll say is I'm a free market economist, but I opposed NAFTA at the time because when I first saw it, it was like 1,000 pages of government regulations. And I didn't think it really constituted free trade at all, but government-managed trade. And I guess you'd have to do a careful study of how it has been managed over the past 15 years or so to really know its effects. But I wouldn't blame the problems on free trade, because I don't think NAFTA was a free trade argument, despite the words free trade.
Thank you.
I more or less agree with Professor DiLorenzo. I do believe in free trade as a concept. I believe most economists do. This is one thing economists of all persuasions more or less agree with. But we do put a lot of provisions in these bills that get far afield from the issue of trade, and I think that is a source of concern. As an economic historian, I would have to note that nations have rises and falls in the way people work and what they do. We had a rise in manufacturing in the 19th and early 20th century because of what us economists say we had a comparative advantage in manufacturing. We have lost some of that comparative advantage today. Some of it has to do with government policies. Some of it has to do with other things that have nothing to do with what the U.S. government does. I don't personally worry too much about the loss of manufacturing jobs per se. What I worry about is the loss of jobs in totality, the productivity of labor in its totality, and so forth. And that is, I think, a broader concern.
You ask very big questions, so let me just try to be very brief. And, I mean, I think it's absolutely true that if we want different results, if we want living standards to continue to grow at a reasonable rate in the United States for the broad workforce, we better start doing lots of things differently. And one of those things we should do differently is our international economic policy. I'm a little shocked to agree. I also did not like NAFTA. I think we need to think about exchange rates very differently, and so we better start doing things differently if we want to continue to grow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.